Howdy y'all, welcome back, thank you for being here. I wanted to preface today's video by letting you know there were only a handful of high quality photographs of Samara that were taken in the 19th century that I could find online. What we'll see in those images, however, is immense architecture, beautiful architecture, some of the finest architecture of the old world. And given the location of Samara and its possible ties to Tartary, one thing that stands out to me the most is the photograph of the Samara Valve Factory that we'll look at the end of the video. This Valve Factory appears to be much more of a defensive structure complete with earthworks. And when we look into that history, we're told the Valve Factory was actually founded on the exact location of the ruins of the Samara Castle. So let's get right into it. Often we see that Russia, or the lands which formerly bore the name of Tartary, contain some of the most picturesque and monumental architecture in history, often a unique blend of aesthetically pleasing shapes, towering places of worship, and lavish structures intended for defensive purposes. Yet, at the heart of all this appears to be a rather convoluted narrative that involves the heavy restructuring of the timeline, which occurred after a series of revolutions throughout the last 200 years. Therefore, photography would play a key role in our modern understanding of the quintessential role that Russia played in international politics, especially before the mid-19th century. Today, we will be looking at the oldest photographs of Samara, Russia. But for more information that may pertain to our particular research into the Old World, let us also go over the current narrative history briefly. The history of Samara begins rather anonymously, as we're told the first accounts trace back to roughly 921, when travelers from Baghdad were said to have made journals to coincide with their expedition to the king of the Volga Bulgars. However, Samara is only briefly described. Western sources on Central Asian powers are described in this narrative as scarce, and we're told much of the written history of this land that today makes up Russia is obscure at best and begins with the legends of Prester John and searches for him in Tartary beginning in 1165. Already that should set off a few connections here, but looking at this history further, the first mention of Samara by name appears to come in the work titled Description of the World Map, produced in the 12th century. In this compelling piece, Hugh of St. Victor compiles information about the most important cities and settlements known to man. Following up on this was Richard of St. Victor, who in his book of Extractions, written in 1153 through 1162, mentions Samara as being founded by the Scythians and being one of their most important settlements. However, the current narrative, per usual, makes little mention of the Scythians beyond this and zero mention of Tartary. We're also told that Samara was most likely a kurgan or mound settlement constructed by the Alans, the Bulgarians, and then the Khazars. We're also told, at least in this particular narrative, that the name Khazar derives from the Arabic word kasir, which meant castle. It's implied in this narrative that Samara was a fortified or castle city, built at some point before written history of the area. We're also told that the Golden Horde occupied Samara for numerous centuries, and in the 18th century, excavations in Samara were undertaken which revealed monumental brick infrastructure created by the Golden Horde, which was said to have lined most of the city. However, it appears most of the original Golden Horde brickwork was quite literally built on top of. History is often cyclical, and it is no surprise that we are told little is known of Samara from the fragmenting of the Golden Horde through the official foundation of Samara, which was often said to have occurred with the border decree issued by Tsar Ivanovich in 1586. However, this decree also involved the founding of a massive defensive castle in Samara, which more than likely was built on the foundations of an earlier defensive structure, most likely the Scythian castle. Adding fuel to this perspective, We're told today all evidence of the fortress of Samara is gone, as it was lost to a great fire in 1690 and a second great fire in 1703. And today, the Samara Valve Factory is quite literally built directly on the ancient site of the castle. Yet we also have some pretty lavish dimensions given for the Samara Castle when it stood. Samara Castle was estimated to stand over 2,000 feet in diameter, with walls roughly 16 feet thick. The castle had 8 towers, all standing at least 25 feet tall, with the largest tower closer to 50 feet tall. The towers also protruded from the castle roughly 10 feet, and the castle could only be entered through a massive gateway, estimated to be nearly 20 feet tall. If we read between the lines, following the decree in 1586, which may be seen as inheriting the original castle, we're told by 1587, a second outer bastion wall was created, making the Samara fortress appear as what we may refer to today as a star fort. As intriguing as this is, we're told the first artistic depiction of the city of Samara and the fortress did not occur until an image was engraved in 1636. During the 17th century, Samara and the fortress grew immensely, and by the year 1690, Samara had at least 5 lines of fortifications defending the fortified city. However, following the great fires I mentioned earlier, which occurred around the end of the 17th century and the second to begin the 18th, the fortress and the city of Samara were said to have been reduced to rubble. Samara remained relatively dormant, we're told, until 1851, when Samara emerged as the center for many mills and industrial-age factories, and became known as the Russian or Tartarian Chicago. More than 375 unique businesses flourished at this time, and the city of Samara had an industrial-age boom that was spearheaded by a rapid influx of construction projects to reshape and rebuild the city. What we are looking at today are the oldest photographs, which may give us a better insight into exactly what was happening during this time period. There you have it, the current narrative history of Samara in the former Tartary in the land of Russia, and the few photographs that I was able to find here in the Western world that were available online in museums and forums. I really did look, and I'd love to see more photographs of Samara. But something else worth mentioning before I chime out here is this was also one of the main locations, one of the cities that was the greatest affected by the famine in Russia in 1921. So that's also something worth noting here, because the city and the landscape of what would become of Samara completely shifted at this time, and any of the historical narrative, it may have also been altered in the process.